Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. Not thank God it's Monday because we always hate Mondays. We have the gang here, and we have Kevin's grandkids in the background too, so they're going to provide.
Yeah, what sounds like the whooping cough, but it's really not. So,
start us off with the pre-show, Russ.
So, I was taught a long time ago in sports that if you're going to go down, you always go down with your best. And the Padres had a moment in Philly where they had a lead. There's a man on. I want to say there's one out. Bryce Harper's coming up.
I think there's nobody out. I was watching.
Maybe nobody out. Suarez is, pitching. And I understand Suarez maybe has a decent average against lefties. But you have Josh Hader, who you haven't used in the last 2 games, and you're in the 8th inning, and this is a must-win game, and you decide to go with Suarez against Harper. You don't walk Harper. You actually let this guy pitch to him. And I'm thinking, man, if you're pitching to Bryce Harper, who's the hottest guy in the playoffs, you have to use your best, who's also a lefty, and is going to minimize Harper to some degree. And he didn't do it. And then what makes me madder is when you interview that guy after the game and he's like, oh, yeah, we never even warmed up Hader. We wouldn't have been able to get him in time. And it's like, yeah, because it never occurred to you, but it should have. Like, if I were the owner, Kevin, I would be so mad at this manager right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, Josh Hader is an intimidating the way he pitches that ball, kind of zipping across to a lefty. I mean, that's it's a bad decision.
Well, and this is symptomatic, Kev, of, and sometimes I'm guilty of overgeneralization, but in baseball, I don't think I am when I say this is a product of analytics, because a similar instance happened in Game 3 of the Yankees-Astros series. The Yankees were down 2-0 in the 6th inning. Garrett Cole had 95 pitches. He'd been pretty effective. The only mistake he had made was a McCormick 2-run home run that was to the opposite field. Bases loaded, nobody out. One was a double, one was a walk. The third was a flare off the end of the bat to right field. So, it was obviously bases loaded. You're concerned. But if you're bringing in your best reliever in the 6th inning, that's one thing. Aaron Boone took him out at 95 pitches. Cole was not happy, and they bring in Lou Trevino, who is their 4th or 5th best reliever, and all 3 runs score, and they lose the game. I think the final score is 5-2, but the game was over at that point. And after the game, he was basically saying, well, we wanted to use Trevino to get to the other relievers to hold the lead. But you know what? The game was right there. It was 2-0. Either you hold them there, and you can argue whether it was better to keep Cole in or bring in the best reliever. But that was the game right there, and you didn't bring in the best reliever. You hope to get through it, and in the end, you lost. So I can't stand the analytical approach. I'm not saying I want every manager to fly by the seat of their pants, but this just numbers crunching bullshit is ruining the game. I don't like it.
I don't think that's a similar situation. Like, that's a guess. That's just a guess right there. And, if you're going to guess, you try to use whatever you have available, and analytics was available. I mean, Hader situation to me is different because
but
that Garrett thing, it's just a guess. I mean, it's like in the betting world. I've talked to one of my colleagues who told me that the best bet in a hockey game is there's a bet that allows you to bet whether or not there's a shutout, that both teams will score a goal. Now, it seems like a simple bet. It works 80% of the time, but 20% it doesn't. So at 105, you still got to guess. You still got to sort of, and that's what I think. So I don't, I'm less bothered by that because, he used whatever he had at his disposal to make that decision. But he still, like, if he'd gone the other way, and it didn't work out, people would have said,
that's true. The one thing I will say, Kev, is what I think analytics has done away with, and we saw it happen with the Mets because Buck Showalter doesn't always listen to analytics, but most of the time he does. Like when Davey Johnson stashed Jesse Orozco in the outfield, used Roger McDowell, used him for a batter, put him in the outfield, put Jesse in at the mound, and he did that for an inning. We're not going to ever see that again. Like, that's not going to happen. And that's the fun part of baseball that's sort of like going to get lost.
Yeah, no, I mean, I see your point and all that, but the other thing about analytics, and it came up during these playoffs, and maybe you can explain it to me, but because I didn't understand it. They were talking about WAR, and someone said that a certain player was, and I can't even remember who it was ranked someplace all time in WAR under this WAR, and another one too. Shouldn't they all be the same? I mean,
there's different categories for WAR. Like it's different for pitchers and hitters. We'll start there.
Right.
So, because obviously, right, they're different.
Two different organizations he was comparing it. He said he was ranked number 1 in the WAR and for whoever.
So maybe it was Juan Soto. Maybe he was ranked a lot more for the Nationals because he did better for the Nationals than he's done for the Padres. Was that?
No, it wasn't to teams. It was different. Like it would be like ESPN's WAR. And,
they had their own WAR. Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Like, to me, they should all be the same. Now, saying all that, if you in hockey world, if you've gotten into Corsi or any of those, you'll note that the NHL.com's Corsi is a little bit different than Hockey Reference's Corsi, than a little bit different than some of the.
I think they're trying to recreate the wheel.
Yeah,
that's what ESPN's doing.
Their own little spin on it. Ours is better than everybody else's.
Now, just to be fair, there are teams in the league that have some of their own, data scientists with their own homemade, analytics. Like, I get it. There's certain things they're looking for. But to just say it like that, I'm with you, Kev. It's confusing.
Yeah. Well, and in hockey, for those of you who are sort of just dipping your toes in analytics, I thought it was interesting that Derek Lalonde, Newsy Lalonde, as his players call him, he's really Lalonde, but anyway, they call him Newsy. He was saying that, talking about pulling a goalie, and he said, we have our analytics here. And he goes, they're a little bit different than Tampa Bay's analytics about pulling their goalie. And he said, I don't want to get into it because I don't want to give any secrets. And I thought, like, wow, like everybody, like when you pull your goalie, like the analytics are different. Like, because to me, that's pretty empirical data if it shows, like, how many times they've scored when you've pulled your goalie at X and
like 4 minutes or 2 minutes or 1 minute.
Like, wouldn't you think that would be the same?
You know what Patrick Waugh's analytics were about pulling the goalie? Anytime I damn well please. That was his analytics.
Well, but he kind of created the.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when he pulled this goalie like that, everybody started looking at it.
Right.
And it's interesting to me in football. I know we've all seen these stories about the high school guy who's been creating the analytics of punting, and his data shows you should never punt. That if you just, no matter where you're out on the field, if you go for it, and he's taken it, a long way. Not only has he looked at it from the high school thing, but he started to create data of everything, and it's really remarkable data.
Yeah, you can't do that in the NFL though. You can't.
No, well, yeah. I think not, but would we ever see it like years from now? I don't know.
No, because we've had guys. Parcells was always a guy that went for it more than most.
Belichick Belichick was the one who started going like for fourth down inside his own 50 before.
No, that was Parcells. Belichick copied him.
Okay, well, I don't remember Parcells doing it.
No, Parcells did it a lot.
But
and Belichick picked it up from Parcells. But even so, the way things are now, I think even that era of football, like when Parcells did it a lot, is a lot different than this era of football.
It's gotten stupid now, Kev. I mean, like when Baltimore went for fourth down in the fourth quarter against the Bills, when they could have gone up, I think they could have gone up by 6. And instead, they went for fourth down. It was on the 8-yard line. It got intercepted. The Bills went down, got a touchdown. I saw numerous instances yesterday where fourth down on the 30-yard line, fourth down. I mean, they're just going for fourth down willy-nilly. It's like I'd love to have the job as the punter or the field goal kicker. It's almost as easy money as being the backup quarterback.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, it matters the team who you're going up against, what their defense is like. So here's an example. So the Jets in the second half, the offense wasn't doing great. Denver's got the third-ranked overall defense. They give up a lot of runs, though. They do. And they did give up a big one in that game. But it was like 4th and 1, maybe even 4th and 2 on like the 5-yard line, and the Jets chose to kick a field goal, put them up by 4 points. you know what? In the end, it turned out to be the right move because they got another possession, kicked another field goal, and at least the worst that Denver can do on their last possession was tie the game.
I'm old school.
So it actually worked out.
If you have an opportunity to get points, get points. I mean,
yeah, I used to always be the go for it guy when I was younger, and maybe it was because I was younger and brasher. I'm kind of like most of the time get the points, except if your team has a bad kicker. If I have a bad kicker, and Parcells and Belichick, and this is why they started to go for it, they have a great hatred for kickers, and Parcells will tell you that. And so if they don't trust the kicker, they just go for it because they don't want to put it in the kicker's hands.
I hate that son of a bitch, Matt Barr.
Mike, but your approach on this really speaks to why they started to do that. You can't really discuss anything without letting anger enter into it. I mean, that's just the way your personality is. Yes. And I think what happened over time is football coaches are passionate people. And I think they realized that their emotions and things were kind of getting in all these decisions. So they were looking for ways to take out the Ojello factor out of the thing. You just get so angry over things that, and that influences how you view things. And I think that's why analytics started to creep into football, because people realized, guys making these decisions, get all fired up about not liking their kickers or their history.
That's why Mike bought Betamax, because he didn't like the VHS commercial.
I was gonna say the walls in my basement can attest to my anger.
But even and the problem with it is, even in the analytical world, and I've brought this up to people, it still comes down. You're going to be right or you're going to be wrong. You can have all the information available, but it's still fate.
Well, it's even with baseball, like with Bill James, right? The Red Sox were geniuses because they listened to Bill James and they got their World Series, but they didn't win the World Series every year. No. If they'd won it every year, then Bill James would have been the greatest, mind of all time.
Because in spite of all the statistics, there are random elements in games that interfere. It's exactly. Always. I mean, okay, I'll just bring it back to the Yankees and then we'll start because people in the chat were wanting me
the Yankees,
to do my post-mortem. Okay. First half of the year, the Yankees were phenomenal. They had very little injuries, and I'm not using that as a cop-out. The Astros were the better team. They shut them down. There were 3 of the 4 games that the Yankees had a chance to win. They didn't get timely hits. They struck out like crazy. They played in the second half. They played like the Yankees of previous years. They struck out too much. They didn't get hits in situations. They rode the wave of Aaron Judge, and then Aaron Judge, after playing so many games down the stretch to get the record, he looked completely gassed in the playoffs. So, I'm not laying on him but when you go 1 for 16 in a playoff series with 7 or 8 strikeouts, and you're the guy that they're depending on, and he didn't get it done, but I think there are reasons why. But I'll just say this: Benintendi was out, LeMahieu was out. Half their bullpen was out. A couple of their starters were out. It really. I'm not saying their goal was always to win the World Series with the biggest payroll. Houston, everything went right, and they're a quality team. I hate their guts. I think I still think that they cheated back in 2017 and 2019. I don't think they're cheating now. I think they're just good. But let's just say I'm having Anthony overnight me a Phillies cap to root for them against the Astros.
I won't wear a Phillies cap, but I'll root for them.
Yes. All right. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, October 24th, 2022.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology, also a Jet fan. Big winners this week.
Yeah. Kevin Allen, not a Jets fan, but they're 5-2. The Giants are 6-1?
6-1.
It's unbelievable if you're a New York football fan. Kevin Allen, HockeyBuzz.
And I'm Michael Ojello, and the Jets and the Giants are New Jersey, and the best team in New York is the Buffalo Bills, who lead the AFC. And this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com as Russ rolls his eyes. All right, just to start off with this because, early in the regular season, there's always injuries. There's always things that come up. But Russell, you and I are both on the same page. Like we hear, Landeskog go down with a knee injury for 3 months, and Ekblad. And it just continued this weekend. Starting out with Josh Norris gets hurt in the 6-2 win over Arizona. He's the number 1 center for Ottawa. Now, they don't think it's going to be like months, but it's a significant injury. And, it's something that I think could affect them. And they're already without Talbot. So now they lose Norris for a little while.
Yeah, losing Norris is big because, I feel like Ottawa was getting close to turning the corner, and now that's a tough one. Like, they have some center depth, but you lose your number one center, and you're scrambling a little bit after that. And so, this may not be what we thought Ottawa would be this year. And that's one of the things, but we are seeing a lot of them. The Matthias Samuelsson one, that's a tough one for Buffalo because he plays top pairing. Even Cam Atkinson, the whole Cam Atkinson thing that was gotten weird because he wasn't in camp for a little while. Then personal reasons. Then he got back to camp. He practiced. He played in one preseason game, and that's it. Hasn't played again. Has some sort of injury. Still hasn't been able to practice. There's a lot of this going on with teams, and I talked about the money aspect of it last week, and it's growing. And maybe like Kev said last week, maybe it's the norm, but I don't know. It seems more than that, but again, don't have any real data to back it up yet.
Yeah. No, I've seen other people tweeting out too, comparing it to years that in the recent years that, they were pointing out some of the stories they had found where, there were a bunch of injuries. But, like we said last time, it's the significance of the players this year to me that seems a little bit different. Like a lot of players that are pivotal players. And I think that's the difference. And that sort of brings it home more. Like, there's always injuries, and that's part of, running the gauntlet in a regular season for the NHL teams. But, with regard to the Senators, it's kind of funny. Like, they started off a little bit of struggle, and then they started to play better, score a bunch of goals. So, like, this comes at a really bad time for them.
Sanderson was kicking in some offense.
Yeah, Sanderson, like, I expected it would be slow for him. Like, I'm really bullish on him. I think he could be more at Sider-esque in terms of, having an impact. But I expected this year it would be a little slow. But, boy, I watched them play, recently on television, and I thought he was very impressive. He looked pretty poised for a guy that's coming out of college. So, yeah, I still like Ottawa, but the Norris injury is a difficult one for them.
Yeah, and I saw this live. The injury, well, not live in person, but live on TV. The Matthias Samuelsson injury to against Vancouver. Kev, when I saw this, I thought it was season ending. It looked like he folded up his knee. Now the reports are it's not as serious as that, but he's going to miss significant time. And this is coming like a week after he signs the big contract with the Sabres.
Yeah, and he's an important guy, shutdown guys. They've been the talk of the league now for the last 5 to 7 years. And, used to think you got to have a number one puck-carrying defenseman. That's the key to winning the cup. And now, to me, it seems like the shutdown defenseman is every bit as important as that guy that can carry the mail for you offensively. So, yeah, that's a big loss for them. And, that's, it really felt like Buffalo had now a top four that was really, really good.
Yeah, it was as good as probably half the league.
Yeah, no, for sure. And now losing him, that robs them of that distinction.
On top of losing Yokiharu, and it's not as serious an injury, but that's two of your top six, and now they're having to call up. Was it Cale? They call Cale Clegg and Lawrence Pilot. I mean,
Clegg's decent. Clegg can be a decent stopgap guy because he can move the puck. His defense isn't his best asset, but he does add offense. So that's something.
And go ahead, Kev.
No, that's all I was gonna.
Oh, and with Toronto, obviously the injury to Muzzin happened last week, but I'm starting to hear, and first Elliot Friedman reported that they're going to take a lot of time when it comes to Muzzin in terms of seeing what's going on here. It's not a concussion, but he had 2 concussions last year. It's a neck injury. They put him on IR instead of LTIR. So they expect him to be back. But all the talk, Kev, out of, Leaf World was we're going to take a lot of time here. We're going to be careful here. We don't want to risk his future. I mean, it's a lot of, it's possible he could be out for the year. I mean, it's not consistent with, okay, he's on IR for 7 days and we're worried about long-term effects here. The two things don't sort of fit. So I don't know where the whole situation is with them.
It reminds me of, back when we just started to become keenly aware of concussions, where it was really a mystery of how long people were going to be out, when they were just sorting it out, how, when you come back and all that kind of stuff. And, almost feels like we're back there then with this one, where they don't really.
I feel like it's a mystery because I've been amazed that Sidney Crosby has never really had a reoccurrence for many years now. Like all of a sudden it's like, wow.
Well, he sort of had one, but it was I remember real keenly this, and it really speaks to a problem I think that Players Association has regarding Crosby and concussions. And one time Crosby was in a playoff game. I don't even remember who it was against, but it was a few years ago. And he came back. He was out of the game, and then suddenly he re-entered the game. And then afterward, the next day, he was getting quizzed by a bunch of us about his thing. And he really just said, look, he said, this is my business. This is my medical issue. Is there anyone who understands more about concussions than I do? I'm pretty sure I know my body than some random person asking me questions about that. He said, I've got keen awareness of it. And, he didn't like the idea that somebody above was saying.
Yeah.
And that is one of the issues that Players Association have about the whole idea of, spotters and things who, could pull games out. And it's a complicated issue because,
the only thing I can think that would change it, Kev, but then you might have some bias, would be if you had a local spotter, like a guy who knows the club and knows the guy's histories and stuff, would that be better, or would that guy let it slide too if it was a big game?
That's the whole argument. Like it really needs to be an unbiased person making the call. But what the union problem is, not all players feel that a third party should decide their medical decisions, and yet the union feels an obligation to try to protect players from themselves in this case.
Right.
Like it's better for you if we have some evaluation. Well, now let's take that jump to the NFL when the idea of that I'm drawing a blank, the Miami Dolphins, Tua, in that point, I think you need a third party to make that decision, because clearly it was a poor one. And you wonder, were they influenced? I'd say yes, by the fact they wanted their quarterback.
Yeah, it was like the guy in the corner in a boxing match, tapping the boxer on his back, telling him how many fingers the referee is holding up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always felt it should be sort of like arbitration. Like in every city, there should be a doctor who has no affiliation with anyone, who is an expert in that field, who is assigned to the games. He comes to the game, he and his partners. So there's multiple guys, and then they go when a player gets concussion-like symptoms, they go to that room and this guy. And now if you want to challenge at the end of the year, which is the same thing like an arbitrator would, and think you can say, okay, we're going to get rid of this guy. And then next year you get a new guy.
The only other thing, Kev, that I felt like is unfair, but there's not much you can do, is when the goalie gets pulled to get looked at. And because that's a tough one. Like you pull a skater and it's like, okay, you lost a skater, but you could survive for a certain amount of time without a skater. You pull the goalie, the starting goalie, and if that's your guy and he's out for a period or two, that's the game.
Yeah, but I've had that discussion with people, and it was pointed out to me by some of the concussion advocates. We're not doing this for competitive reasons. We're trying to protect the players.
No, I get it.
So we don't care whether he's a goalie or not.
Yeah.
Well, and we welcome Joe Yurden to the show. Joe, when Tua is staggering around like a Pier 6 drunk near the end of the first half, I don't know how anybody in their right mind could have kept him in the game, but lo and behold, he comes out and ends up winning the game for Miami. Now, obviously, I'm talking like a Bills fan here, but I just thought it was ridiculous that he was back in the game. We were talking about Samuelson. and I was watching that game live, and I thought he's done for the year. This is bad. This is ugly. And the reports are now it's not as serious as people thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's that was the immediate word after the game, which is good to know. The team was off yesterday. They stayed in Vancouver another day. They're in Seattle. I think they're in Seattle now. So I think they're practicing probably in another hour or so out there. So I think we'll get an update on what Samuelson's injury is, or maybe they'll just tell us it's lower body. He's out for X number of weeks. But if it's not a ligament tear, which it doesn't, I mean, if it was, I imagine they would say it's as bad as they feared. I'm expecting it to be a sprain of some kind, and he'll miss probably 2 to 3 weeks, which, all things considered, and the way that looked, that's the absolute best case scenario for him.
Yeah, no, we were going to talk about and Russ, let's talk about Tortorella first before we talk about surprises. But go ahead.
All right, so yesterday the Flyers lost the game 3-0, but going into the third period, it was a 2-0 game. They were getting dominated to some degree. There's some things that are catching up with the Flyers, like the Torts system of playing in your own end, and high danger chances for the goalie. Like it's that can be tough. But Torts pulls Konechny and Hayes. Problem is JVR already got hurt in that game in the second period. So now you've essentially chopped off half of your top six. And they went with mainly fourth liners and, some young players for that third period. And you knew there wasn't a prayer of scoring a goal. Like, you just knew it. Now, again, Zach McEwen, Delorier, Sedlak, they're all getting major ice time. And, and at the end of the game, Torts is like, yeah, well, they played hard. And so there's this fine line now where Torts pulls the guys. Post-game, the guys don't know why they're pulled. He didn't talk to them. So they have no answer other than to say, well, we've been on the ice for a couple goals. Maybe that's it. But again, the Flyers aren't a great team regardless of their start. If he's going to just start pulling guys who are on the ice for goals against, he's going to pull the whole team at some point this year. So it has to be more than that. So then when they ask Torts, he's like, well, we're going to keep that in the room. But the problem is you're not keeping it in the room because it's public. If something goes on with the team, and Kev can speak to this because he's been around this longer than all of us, something goes on with the team that doesn't have to be known and isn't out there, they can keep that in the room and we're never going to know, and it's fine. But when you obviously bench 2 of your top scorers for a period and then decline to talk about it, you're doing your fans a disservice, because the fans are like, what the hell is going on here? Yeah.
He's done that for a long time too. And it's really a simple solution. All you got to say is, they weren't playing as well as they need to play. I need those guys to play at a high level. I mean, He doesn't have to get into great detail.
No.
I mean, he just needs to say, yeah, I was unhappy with their playing level. These are key players. So I've never understood that. I mean, he creates a bigger problem because then
now they can't move on from this loss. Like, the next practice is going to get asked again.
Yeah, well, and they're going to wonder, they'll be looking to see playing time for them. And the one thing historically with Tortorella, and I know you know this, your stay in his doghouse is generally short, as long as you don't, continue to perform not to his liking. So it is going to be interesting. But I mean, it sure felt like by singling out those specific players that he was just sending a message that, look, we got off to a good start, but I'm still Tortorella.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you what I think the message was, and then we can go around the room here. I think the message was, I'm going to play my fourth liners in this third period because they play as hard as I want them to play. You play harder. And it's like, okay, but those guys can't score. They had a 3-on-2, and they had no prayer of scoring.
Joe, I when I was talking to Russ about this earlier, I thought, okay, Konechny and Hayes, he's benching veterans. He's not benching Morgan Frost or Farabee or any of the younger players like Cates. He's benching the veterans. And this is Torts sending signals, as he's always done. And I think he does it with guys who he thinks he can do that to without like hurting their feelings because they've been around.
Yeah. And the thing about Torts is that he's going to be as fair as outwardly as fair to his players as he can. Yeah. Because he doesn't give a damn what the media wants. He does not care if we want to know stuff. He'll tell us, but Other than that, he's gonna keep it out of our ears because he doesn't care about us, and that's not like necessarily a bad thing. That's the way he operates. He keeps it in the room. He wants to focus on his team and his guys solely. That's it. That's all he cares about. This is totally the kind of thing that you do when you're trying to get through to these to your top players, because that's what Kevin Hayes and Konechny are now with them.
Right.
We're trying to deliver that message that, like, listen, we don't need you. Like, yeah, I mean, we do need you, but like maybe you'll see how bad we do need you. So step up your play, get it right, because otherwise I'll keep rolling these guys out there in the third period. You can keep watching them and you can sit there and think, boy, man, I really screwed up. I better get my act together, because we've seen him do this before. He's done it with the Rangers. He's done it with Tampa. He's done it everywhere. So at some point, you think word would get around to players that, hey, maybe we should just listen to the coach and do what he says instead of just kind of peeling back and not listening to Torts, because he's going to get your attention one way or another, whether you like it or not.
Now, we were going to talk about like things that are surprising us right now. We're less than 2 weeks into the season. We all made preseason predictions. I'll fess up on one that I thought the Boston Bruins were in danger of missing the playoffs, with Ottawa and Detroit making progress, Buffalo making progress. David Pastrnak on a salary drive, 10 points. David Krejci took a year off in the Czech Republic or Czechia, 7 points in 6 games. They're 5-1. Gee, could I have been any wronger or more wrong, Kev?
Yeah, no, they've been impressive just to overcome the injuries that they've had. And, we didn't even mention guys that are coming back off of injuries. And, we've seen other players around the league. Like, there's always a difference between when you come back and then when you're playing, the hockey that you were playing before you were injured. Sometimes you come back from an ACL in maybe 6 months, but you're still not the same player for a full year. And the Bruins guys of all, Bergeron was coming back from something. A lot of guys were coming back from him, and they're all playing well. Their goaltending has been good, and they have the luxury of they're still looking around now for they're in the middle of almost all trade rumors you hear, as they're trying to find kind of one more defenseman. So my team is not a big one. I didn't think they were going to make the playoffs, but I saw the Anaheim Ducks live last night, and I really like all their younger players. I'm really bullish on McTavish. I'm bullish, obviously, on Zegras. I keep expecting that Drysdale, is going to show that he can be kind of a Niedermeyer type impact player. And I watched them last night, and they're just not that team yet. Not even remotely close. They just don't seem to, and maybe it'll come mid-season, because you never quite know when it's going. But right now, they're going to struggle. And then the other team that I was wrong about was the Blackhawks. I thought the Blackhawks were going to be one of the worst 2 teams in the league, and they're not. They play with heart. They've won 3 consecutive games with coming from behind to win it. Now, they didn't beat good teams, but my only point on them is for us to think they're going to be as bad as Arizona. I don't think they will be. When you got Patrick Kane still, Jonathan Taves is actually playing better than he did last season. Their goaltending has been okay. So they're going to be a lot more competitive. So, and I think that affects things, because I think you can't now say, we're going to beat the Chicago Blackhawks X amount of times if you're in the, Central Division. So those are the 2 teams that I think I've been the most wrong about.
Joe, I didn't see, like, after being placed on waivers, Nick Foligno coming back and scoring 3 goals with the Bruins, or Linus Ullmark being the go-to guy and Swayman being the backup. So a lot of things that are happening there just didn't compute when I was saying that they were going to be out of it. Is there a team that you thought was going to either be really bad and is good, or really good and has been bad so far?
Well, I'll tell you first off, Mike, the first mistake you made was picking Boston to fall back, because I think we've all been waiting for it to happen for a few years now. Right. Them and Pittsburgh both, and they're both.
I did it last year. I didn't do it this year.
Right. Like, just some point, I'm just kind of like, you know what? I'm just going to stay away from them.
They're vampires. That's what.
Yeah, exactly. There's not enough garlic in the world to keep them away. It surprises. I'm really I want to be surprised about Vegas, because I thought they would get out slow, just because they had so many guys coming back from injury. You didn't know what was going to happen and go with them. Logan Thompson is pretty good. Eichel's had a great start. Vegas looks more like the Vegas I think we all were expecting to see last year. Marchessault's had a huge start. Chandler Stevenson's found his touch again. So I like Vegas. I just thought they were going to get out of the gate really slow, and they haven't. It's any of the worries that I had for them are not there. It's not to say they won't be there in a month or two, but I think Vegas has looked really good.
Don't you think, Joe? I don't know. This may be for everyone. I think we misread Eichel because I think there's a tendency not to like him.
Yeah.
And all the problems that Eichel had to me seems pretty clearly were about his injury.
Yeah.
Because, he is a terrific player.
Yeah.
When he is healthy, and
the one thing about this show, Kev, because we all had interaction with Eichel. We all never fell for he's bad for the team or whatever guy, but there is that out there, and it's not true.
Well, he can be surly. He can be
difficult
to deal with. And I think that impacts, it's the same thing. It's reminiscent of Phil Kessel. Like, people want to think they really undervalue his accomplishments because they think he's out of shape and everything. But the guy's played 989 consecutive games. He's going to have 400 goals as next goal. He's won 2 Stanley Cups. Like, he's a terrific hockey player.
Sounds like a guy who'll be in the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame.
He will, for sure.
Somebody on this panel.
He will be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Even though I'm on the committee, I don't mind saying I just don't see how you not put him in. But he's not going to get into the regular Hall of Fame. 400 goals just isn't enough. But he's just a guy that's in the news now, and I'm just always amazed that people, laugh at him. And but he's been a very productive player. He's just not. He looks like a rec league player, but he's got skills like a blue chip premium player.
The mistake with Kessel, and it goes back to the trade from Boston to Toronto, was the fact that Brian Burke sold him as a franchise cornerstone in Toronto when he's a high level complementary player. He's somebody, like, when he went to Pittsburgh, it was perfect. Crosby, Malkin, centerpieces. He's the guy who plays on the wing. And in fact, when they won the Cups, he was on the third line with Bonino. They had the HBK line. So he's a 35 goal scorer. You can set it in stone, but he was never a star. And to give up 2 first-round picks like Burke did and then sell it to the Toronto media, I don't think he ever shook off that taint, Joe. He was sold as something more than he actually was, when he was actually a very good player, but they sold him as being more than that.
Yeah, he was sold as that, and with that comes the expectation that you're going to talk to everybody all the time. And Phil's not a talker. Phil does not like talking. He's, and it's not even the thing where, he hates the media. It's not something like that. He gets very uncomfortable in front of the cameras, but it's not to say that he's not enjoyable when he does, because I discovered the 1 year I was covering the Leafs that the longer you kept Phil around and the more you kept asking him questions, the quicker it turned into a roast or him just kind of cracking jokes at the reporter's expense. So that on its own was kind of funny, but probably didn't help him out too much there either. But
look, I overhyped Phil when I was writing for NHL.com in the World Juniors, my first World Junior, because he was a star. You could see he could score a lot. He was really on the cusp of some great U.S. teams that were going to come. And I overhyped the guy.
And people forgot that he overcame cancer. He had, to have the career that he had after that is
a great point.
Okay, I'll pat myself on the back.
I have to give one.
Oh, go ahead.
I know it's hard. I'm really digging to find where I've actually been wrong. It's hard, but I'm gonna come up with the Vancouver Canucks, because I thought they had the makings, at least on paper, of a playoff team. And I looked at them and I was like, I get their defense isn't great.
I did,
but I did not expect them to be at the bottom. The irony is here, and I mentioned it on Off the Post, is Vancouver team. The best guy in the draft is from North Vancouver, Connor Bedard. If they just stay where they are, they have a great chance of getting them. But clearly that was not their plan. And it may not stay that way, but things are falling apart there. And it's not Bruce Boudreau's fault. Like, JT Miller now is no longer playing center. And so now that contract looks even worse, because now you're overpaying him like $1.5 million a year because he's not playing center anymore. So the things that are going on today, and the Russian Kuzmakov, whatever, something close to that. Kuzmenko, thank you. I knew he was. I had gotten reports from him in Russia that he was on again, off again, never was a star even in that league. And he's got like 1 or 2 points in 6 games, and he's already like a -5. Like, they hyped the hell out of him. They did. Their defense is just bad. It's just plain bad, and it really derails that team because Demko is a good goalie, but now Demko thinks he has to make every save and give up 1 goal a game or he can't win, which is crazy, but that's sort of where they're at. So that's a big miscalculation by me.
It's crazy that Quinn Hughes is averaging 27 minutes a game.
And
now he's out of the lineup, so they don't even have him to lean back on. Kyle Burrows played well over 20 minutes against Buffalo the other night, and I'm like, I don't even really know Kyle Burrows that well, so that doesn't bode well.
Jack Rathbone was -3 in the game.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because CJ Chris Johnston came out. He has a column that a newsletter he sends out every week, and as part of it, he's saying now that the Canucks are hinting at a retool along the lines of the Rangers. I mean, this is 6 games into the season, and already they're morphing from we're going to contend for a playoff spot, and we've got all these good young players, to now we're going to do the rebuild like the Rangers did. What's next? They're going to send out the letter.
Connor Bedard does help change your mind.
Oh, I know, Russ, but you're sort of changing from 5th gear into 1st. It's
Teams
really
do this in other sports. The New York Jets have done this for a decade.
6 games
Until they finally, don't have to. I mean, it happens all the time.
They're talking about firing Boudreau, and now they're talking about retooling after 6 games.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
They've been trying to rebuild on the fly basically every year since 2011. It's crazy. They've been trying to string it along. Like they did it with the Sedins. They're like, well, we got them. We got to try to make sure we can ride these guys out, and this will work out great. Then Kessler, his everything with him fell apart. That was unfortunate.
That's why everybody in that market, those fans are Meshuggah when you listen to them on the radio, man. If you don't know the word, just look it up. But I'm just telling you, they are crazy.
But it's like they set these standards very high in Vancouver. Which I mean, hey, listen, I understand it, but I mean, Elias Pettersson doesn't have anybody surround him. Bo Horvat hasn't really had anybody helping him out, and Pettersson's a top level player. I don't know that Horvat's a first line guy. I mean, he is in Vancouver, but he's not the guy that you're running out there with your first line every game. I mean, I love him. He's a great player, but I mean, if he's your guy heading up the attack, you got some problems.
Kevin, yeah. I think the Vancouver fan base rivals Toronto for their irrationality. But they're justified because there's been a lot of talent there, and there's been a lot of talent there. But as I said before, there was a need at some point over the last decade to say, we're going to rebuild. We're going to get bad for a year or two, but ownership clearly never bought into that, and they kept stringing this thing along. And it's just like Toronto did years ago when they failed to tank for Tavares or Stamkos, and they kept stringing along because Matt Sundin was good. It's wrong. Either you're good or you're not good, and you have to determine what you have on hand. And they don't have a grasp. And now 6 games into the regular season, and you're talking about firing Boudreau and going for Bedard. I mean,
yeah. I don't think they were ever in a position to retool. I mean, I don't think that, it's real nice to say we're going to rebuild, but when you're sitting there with 2 Hall of Fame twins, unique players in NHL history, it's hard to do that. I mean, it's easy to talk about it. And now they're in a position where they have too many people with long-term contracts. So now I'm not sure they can do it anyway. I mean, you basically got to do it. I mean, they're going to have to if they decide to go that way. And I agree with you, by the way, that now it's too soon. I mean, you can't look at that team and not think, well, there's enough pieces there if they get the people along the edges. They're going to have to change the players that are on the 3rd and 4th line to try to, kind of create the right, chemistry. But I think now it would be difficult, to try to do that. I mean, Toronto could do it because it was easy. It took some time still to get rid of all the players on the team. Buffalo could do that as well. But I don't think Vancouver Canucks have ever really been in the position. I think they've always kind of, their situation could be similar to what LA, if they're going to do it like LA. LA had Kopitar, they had Doughty. Right. They couldn't just get rid of everyone. Right. So they've just committed. These are our guys. We're going to build around them. That's what you got to do. You got to say, look, we're doing it instead of a 20-person rebuild, we're doing it at 18 or a 17 or whatever they decide the players are going to do. And, tell those guys, hang with us or choose to go elsewhere, So I don't know. I think Vancouver's stuck.
Helps to win a lottery too, especially in LA's case, like that's
grab
it out of your hat. That's a nice help.
Well, that's why it's so ludicrous, the idea that, it solves everything if you get in the lottery. Well, no, it doesn't. You might not, you only got a 25% chance of getting out.
So ask Tim Murray about that. Jeez.
You talk to people, like Shane Malloy or Russ knows a lot about the draft in the sense that this draft is a little different because you have three guys. I mean, Bedard's the cherry on top of the sundae, but you have Fantilli and you have Mishkov, and there are a couple other players as well. So there's quality probably in a greater amount than in previous drafts. But like when it was Matthews, there was one chance in 5 that the Leafs were going to get the first overall pick, but it made sense because the Leafs were not going anywhere.
Yeah, this year's a little more, I would say, tempting because you got 3 guys who are potentially franchise guys, and you don't get that very often. So it really can make you change your plans. Like, I get it. That's why I said it the other day. Like, hey, they're already down in the cellar. They get one of those 3. They're not that bad of a team. And like Kevin said, it would speed up a rebuild for them compared to other teams.
Now, with my sore shoulder, I will officially pat myself on the back for getting it right. Granted, 6 games into the season, that the New York Islanders were the New York Islanders, were the team that they were last year. Because right now, with the same roster, they didn't make any changes whatsoever except for Alexander Romanov. That was the only significant change that they made. They are 2-4. They cannot score goals. They can play defense. They've always been able to play defense, at least in the Barry Trotz, now post-Barry Trotz era, Russ. But this team is the same team, the same struggles.
Yeah, I mean, they are. The issue is, and again, I've talked to a lot of Islander fans. I see the posts. Matt Barzal is a point a game, right? But for whatever reason, they're trying to turn him into more of a goal scorer. And that's a very tough transition for a guy who's a playmaker, a natural playmaker. And so, like, even fans now are like, well, can't you score more? And it's like, historically, he's going to score like 20 goals at every level. That's pretty much what you're getting out of Matt Barzal. Brock Nelson's a better goal scorer than Matt Barzal, because that's what he is. So trying to change that is hard. Getting production out of Parisi and Palmieri and Pajot is killing them. And some of those guys are fast and some of them are slow. So that some games when they're playing against some of the faster teams, they could get slowed down by their bottom 6, not bottom 6, but their, bottom 2 lines. And while their defense is good, they're not loaded with really good puck-moving offensive defensemen. They have a few, and Romanov is kind of like in the middle of that. And he's getting played a lot. Like, they're playing him 20, 21 minutes a game trying to fill some sort of void, and even that, I feel, is a bridge too far. So Sorokin's great. He's going to have a great year, but this team can't score on a regular basis. They just can't. They're a team that is going to score 2.5 goals a game, and where Lou used to say that they live and die by the differential, this year they're going to die by it because it's going to be too much for Sorokin.
Now, Joe, Elliot Friedman this afternoon was talking about the Islanders and the fact that, they may be in on Chychrun, they may be on Patrick Kane, but, I don't know if Patrick Kane's going to get traded until the deadline, if at all. Those seem like sort of home run throwback type of maneuvers by Lou Lamoriello to change the narrative. Where he needed to change the narrative was during the offseason with a team that after making the conference final 2 years in a row and shortened and quite, situations like the bubble in an 82 game season, they struggled and he didn't change anything.
Yeah. It looks like a worse version of what he did with the Leafs. salary wise, roster wise. I mean, this not changing anything is a wild move to make, considering your team wasn't. I mean, they rallied the second half of the year. I'll give them credit for that, and they had a horrible schedule to start out. I mean, your first 14 games are on the road. That stinks, but you still got to play. And that team, the first half of the year, they were horrible. They were a horrible team. They couldn't score. They couldn't do any of that stuff. And now you're looking at it where, okay, your goal scorers are Anders Lee and Brock Nelson. Well, that same as it always is. And thankfully you've got Noah Dobson, who's stepped up and become a guy. That's great, but that's it. You don't have anybody else. And Barzal sets everybody up, but you're talking about running a one-line team and then 3 lines of grinders, and they don't have anybody they can call up.
Yeah, Wallstrom should be set up with somebody great. Like I think even Lee would be okay if Wallstrom were with Barzal for a while, because I think Lee would still score. You put him with Beauvillier, and I think you can get by with that, because you got to have like a combination where you got to unlock Wallstrom, and Barzal's probably the guy to do it. But again, you're not getting your best defensive lineup then, and that's part of it.
Yeah, Kev. When I was looking at the box scores, and Wallstrom, who's I think still leading the team with 3 goals, is averaging about 11 minutes a night, and Zach Parise is playing 15. So something's not right there.
Well, I was wrong about the Islanders, because I thought, he did make one significant move. He got rid of Barry Trotz, who's, an institution. But I guess what I was wrong about is I thought Lambert would, make changes to how they played, but he hasn't. Like, they're playing exactly the same way. They're playing, a defensive-oriented style, and maybe he just figures they don't have the horses in order to do it. It doesn't help that Brock Nelson is off to a horrible start as well. So, yeah, there's nothing been good about it, and they're going to have to do something different, and makes you wonder. I know I've been told by someone that they thought Lambert was pulling a lot of the levers last year anyway, so it really isn't a change. I don't know if that's true, but it's really been disconcerting to watch them play, because if you're not going to change the personnel, you have to change the approach, and the approach looks exactly the same, and you have a few guys who were better last year than they were this season, and that's been deadly for them.
Russ, do you have another surprise?
Another surprise. Well, I keep trying to send this text. I'm gonna say the other surprise is the New York Rangers, because Gallant is starting now to show a little frustration with his team. And it is year 2. So now I'm kind of, I see what people have been talking about when he gets into year 2 and he's like, I don't like what I see here. We're not playing hard enough. We're not, so they're not necessarily playing the Gallant way. And, they're still a top team. But I think Gallant is starting to show some cracks here. So I don't know what's going to happen with them this year if he's actually going to end up being the problem.
Joe, there does seem to be, especially with the veteran coaches, a time frame of when that they can have success before they wear on the team that they're coaching. Babcock in Toronto, I think after 2 or 3 years, they were ready. It was ready for insurrection. They were done with him. Alain Vigneault at times, Claude Julien at times, but Torts, Laviolette, it seems to be a window of like 2 or 3 years, and then they lose that locker room.
Yeah, it's funny that it works out that way, because I think just sometimes hearing the same voice over and over again. I mean, it's 82 games a year, the cramped schedules, all that stuff. At some point, the voice just no longer registers, and the guys tune out. Especially if you're coaching a style where it's not fun to play necessarily for players. Like if it's a fun style and you're winning more games than you're not, it's great. Yeah, everybody's having fun. It's super. But you think of the styles that guys like Trotz coaches, or Trotz sticks around everywhere with that, except for Washington or the island, I guess. That weird, but guys where it's really strict and it's really tough. It burns out quick. Even Pete DeBoer. Pete DeBoer looks like a genius in Dallas right now, but we've seen it before. It happened in San Jose, happened in Vegas. So
Bruce Cassidy in Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a weird ending in Boston last year.
I think that was more about two players who didn't like him and the front office deciding we need these players more than we need Cassidy.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's a quick way to make a coaching move. That's for sure.
Yeah, and there's one element to coaching changes that is often overlooked. We talk about that they wear themselves out with players, but usually the end for coaches come when they wear themselves out to the organization. And by that, I mean the general managers and just the general organization, Peter Laviolette and Gerard Gallant, and maybe Cassidy. I don't know this, but for sure, but I can speculate on that. But the other two I do know. In the end, it was the guys above them that were weary of him. Peter Laviolette has got a personality that's difficult to deal with. And, not everybody enjoys the experience with him. And, maybe that was the case with Cassidy because at the end, he had a pretty short rope from Sweeney. Like, he was still a pretty successful coach when he got the boot. That plays a big role in it as well. I mean, you got to be on the same page with your GM. They've got to be comfortable with you too, as well. And I think in the end, sometimes that's what causes the quick kind of hook.
Joe, just because we have you on, and I know that you're a big Yankee fan like I am, I just wanted to end on this because Russ and I are disagreeing. He thinks that Boone is going to get fired. I don't. I think they got to the ALCS. There are a lot of injuries. My question is about Judge, and I don't think anybody knows other than Judge. But what are your feelings about how things ended, and what do you think about Boone and Judge, and what's going to happen with them?
I think what's happened is just the sum up of all the shortcomings that it comes from ownership. And Cashman can only do whatever they'll allow him as far as the money goes. And Boone can't manage a bullpen to save his life. That's my big problem with him there. I mean, they had a lot of key injuries, key acquisition guys that they added, where it was going to fill out the roster, was going to make it a little bit better, but guys,
and they all got hurt.
Yeah, that's the tough. I mean, that's tough, but you can't run it back with everybody again. Like, you can't run it back saying like, well, Donaldson will figure it out. No, he won't. He's done. He's washed. Aaron Hicks will get it back. No, he won't. He's toast. Like, it's guys like that, but they got him on contract now, for 1-2 more years. I know in Hicks's case, it's like what, 2 or 3, 4?
It was a 7-year deal, and he's I think 3 in.
Well,
it's only $10 million a year, so they can get rid of it. They can pay off somebody to take it. But
Donaldson at 23 million is bad. Nobody.
Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is a terrible shortstop. He was, So, but
it blows my. Well, the thing that's damning for me for Boone is that you took Kiner-Falefa out in Game 3.
Yes.
Because the fielding's not there, or Game 2 or whatever it was. And it's like, well, the fielding's bad. We can't get that done. And then you start him in the next game. Yeah. He wasn't good enough to start the last game. You're going to put him in a pivotal must-win game? Okay, sure. All right, man, whatever. Like, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy you have 3 shortstops killing it in the minors, and you're like, you know what? This guy who hits 230 and can't field well, let's keep running him out there. This is working well.
Yeah, no, they were set on buying time, buying a year with IKF, and not having to force Volpe or Peraza or Cabrera into the major leagues. And in the end, they played Cabrera and Peraza in the major leagues. And actually, I think they would have been better options than Kiner-Falefa. So, I just don't know. The whole thing, just around the horn before we end here.
Mike, as fascinating as the Yankees are, since we do have Joe, Joe Darlene, 5 goals in 5 games, first 5 games for a defenseman. He's extending a record. Like, where's he going to stop? Yeah,
it's wild, man. The goal he scored against Vancouver broke Vancouver because it wasn't a clean shot or anything. It was just something that hits off somebody, then it bounces and goes 5-hole. Right. And the second that goes in, everybody in the Vancouver bench is like, geez, here we go. And it's starting the game with this instead of having it be us blowing a lead, and it sucked the air right out of the room. It's home opener, and then you give up that goal first. And it's a killer. But geez, Dahlin's he looks unbelievable. It's very justifying, and people like our spots, like Russ, all of us that were like, this guy's going to be incredible.
Yeah, I never wavered. I believe in him.
All right, and like we're just like, no, he needs things to be right. And then after 4 years, people are just like, I don't know.
Yeah, he's on pace for 82 goals.
He looked like a superstar at the World Junior in Buffalo. Everybody was like, oh, if they get this guy, and Joe, this is what I said before, and I think this shows how bad and how dysfunctional Ralph Kruger and the hire of him with the Sabres was. Mm-hmm. He screwed up this guy for 2 years, and Don Granato, I think, has gotten him on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild that Granato was Ralph's assistant. Like, I want to know if that was Ralph's choice or if that was the GM's pick. But man, it's a night and day difference with their styles of play. I mean, Kruger's such a defensive minded guy. I mean, he wanted every game to be 2-1 or 1-0, but when you have guys like Eichel and Reinhart and all that, why are you clamping down on them? Why are you putting Skinner on the third line with Vlad Sobotka and Marcus Johansson, making Johansson playing center? Like,
Johansson's actually doing very, very well again with the Capitals. But we should ask Kevin maybe to finish off. Kev, what defenseman comes to mind that sort of has had like a start like this that you were just like, wow, this is unbelievable?
That's a great question. I haven't really given that any thought. I'm sure there are some guys that started slowly. But he's 22 now. I
think Potvin started off slow at the Island.
Yeah, not this slow though.
No, not this slow. I wish he would.
Yeah, he was. Potvin was like 20 when he was drafted.
Sure.
So, that one comes to mind.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. I mean, but no, it's okay. But and Joe, the 1-2 punch. I mean, first of all, I'm sure that Kevin Adams is kicking himself and saying, "Damn it, I should have gotten him on the 8-year deal." Because now he's going to cost me 9.
You want to sign an 8-year deal?
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, think about it. At the time, though, you weren't sure what he was going to turn into yet. So you signed him for 2-3 years at $6 million a year. Like, that's a good midway point to just say, like, we still think you're good, but we really need to kind of see it. And now he's pulling the PK, the PK one where he had to sign that. He signed that like half. It was the lockout year, and he had to sign like that short term, like the 1-year deal. And everybody's like, "Dude, you got to lock him up forever." And Montreal's like, "Well, whatever. He's got to prove it to us." And he wins the Norris, and they got to pay him $9 million a year after that. Like,
there you go.
So I mean, the Buffalo. I mean, Sabres weren't in a spot to extend him at least this year, but like July 1st. The 8-year contract is going to be.
I think it's fair to say, Joe, while they had an issue with believing in them, he had an issue in believing in them.
How could you not? I mean, you watched. I mean, he played with Jack for a few years. You saw what happened with him. It was 6 years of his career that basically got flushed down the toilet because they never put it together, never could figure it out. And when they wanted to restart it again, Jack said, "No, I don't want to. Like, I'm not doing this again. Like, we're doing this for the third time. Well, I've been here." No way, man. Get me out of here. Like, I can't blame Dahlin if he was like, I don't know. Let's see.
I'll make a proclamation as far as like looking at 20 to 23-year-old defensemen. This crop right now that's in the NHL is incredible.
Yeah.
It's Heiskanen and Hughes and Makar and Dahlin. It's
Luke Hughes is going to get in on the back end of the year on this. Like, it's pretty impressive. Fox is still not an old man.
Yeah.
Is Luke Hughes going to be playing a little better defense? Or are we just going to press the gas in the offense and say, forget it?
He's more of a retrieval guy. I don't know if he'll ever, he'll be okay on defense.
He's the big brother. Isn't he like 6'2"? So he's
taller. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He's bigger. He's a little more physical. But it's an amazing crop. If we mentioned Sider, great. There's going to be more. Edmondson will eventually get in on that. Like, they're creating them, Kev. This is a big crop of defensemen.
Yeah, no, for sure. They're bigger too. That's the amazing point. Yeah. Fox is the aberration because he's, but the other guys are big. They're mobile and they're going to have. I agree with you. This is just a terrific crop.
Yeah, Sabres fans haven't even seen like Owen Power what he can do yet.
Yeah. There's another guy. Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that this is what it is, but everybody needs a great defenseman now.
Or 2 or 3. All right. Good job, guys. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Joe Yurden, for Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.